What's up, guys? I'm going to show you now how to use Aerodynamics tab to set your own rear wing, front wing under tray, or even adjust your main body aerodynamics. So what you need to do, you press E, we're going to go into our edit model, and it's pretty simple. So what you want to do is, if you're in your main, you can do a new subobject. You click that, and that will drag this out here, and you get some options. So if you go into your object type, we click that, we have those options. We have rear wing, front wing, our under tray, or just an aero center. Defines kind of a center for an aero effect. So what we'll do is we'll just say we want a front wing. As you see now, it changes to an F for front wing. You can see I've already set a rear wing for the rear of the car. We'll just say the lip has some form of downforce. Move it up so it's in line with the lip. These can't be moved left and right, even if you try to move them left and right. And then say duplicate it and put, 2 front wings for some reason along the sides there. When you go back and then go back into the editor, it'll just put it both back to the origin. So I'll delete this one. We only need one. You only ever need one. So the rear and the front, and I can even add I'm just going to duplicate my front, bring this back, and we'll say this car has the under tray as well. So that's roughly here in the center. Put it kind of somewhere in there so you can see it. It's a U now for under tray. So we have our rear, front, and under tray. And now you're ready to go. So now you just escape, go back to your aerodynamics, and you'll see now we have the option to use a rear wing, front wing, or under tray. So if I click use, some options pop up. So I can click use for my front now too, and I'll turn on my under tray. So we have a lot of options. So what you can do, I'll start off easy. So you have your main body. If you didn't have any aerodynamics from these additional features, your main body does have some benefits. Like the 730 Chimera, I can say that the hood angle kind of, adds a little bit of downforce, your windshield, the drag coefficient of the body is very sleek. It's not much sticking out other than the mirrors maybe. The headlights are slanted. They're not too bad. The car is relatively wide though. So all those take into consideration. You don't really have to be a pro at aerodynamics. I don't know much, but I know enough to kind of get a rough idea. So I've set it to negative 0.250 newtons at 1 meters per second is the max lift. And this can be changed with speed. When you go to your downforce tab, you have a test speed. So at 1 meters per second, it's getting a negative 0.250. So at 40, that just multiplies. And you can test the speed, put it up and down. You'll see my lift, I'm getting negative lift, or 5,702 newtons of downforce. And you can see it'll change the force distribution once I've adjusted my rear and front wings. Since right now they're actually at 0, so they're not getting anything. My front wing is set to have a maximum 20, so I can adjust that. But if I've had my rear wing you'll see now, I'll move on to that, is minimum 0, maximum 0. So I have no adjustment here. It just gives me an error message. So you really want to make sure if you're not going to use a rear wing, you right click your max lift and set it to 0, and it'll turn off the wing or front wing or whatever you want to turn off. If you want to use it again, just click use and it'll come back. Defaults right now are negatives 0.6 for lifts on the rear wing, front wing, and the under tray. So what you can do is you can either set a minimum and a max. I'm going to set a maximum of, let's say, 5 degrees for the rear wing. And we'll just say for test purposes, we'll keep 20, or I'll go up 10 in the rear. So 10 is max in the rear, and you'll see now 10 is in the middle here, 20 is the max that you can go for angle for the front and rear wing. So you'll see here in the bottom right, you have a downforce distribution. So it almost acts as a weight distribution the faster you move, you're driving your car. So you can see now, since my front wing is so aggressive, At high speeds, I'm actually getting a higher weight distribution in the front than the rear. So if I tone that down, you can get more of a 50-50 bias at speed, at a test speed of 52. Roughly, when you get this low, this doesn't really come into effect until later on. It's just mainly where the downforce distribution is hitting the car. It's just saying that in proportion, you're kind of doing a little more front than I am rear, and that's creating this sort of bias in the car. So I can adjust this. I can keep very high rear bias if I've added more downforce. So say we're stock, maybe more closer to 52 and front is 47. With a rear wing, if I put the downforce up at speed, the distribution moves all to the back. There's a lot more weight, in quotes, being pushed down on the back using the force of the wind moving around you, and that's creating downforce to keep the tires planted into the ground. I'll get into the extras here. So what you can do with extras, to my knowledge, is when you go up in extras, you're adding that downforce without needing to move the actual downforce slider. So you can see here now I'm actually at 0 front and rear, but yet when I say extra, I'm getting that rear downforce on my rear wing. So it's basically just a way to start with, even if you want to run, if the player decides to run 0 degrees of rear wing, you can say extra and say, well, actually no, you are going to get downforce back there. Even if you try not to, you're still going to have at least an extra 3 degrees is what I assume the 3 means of downforce. So if we take that off, it's a 57.6, and we go 3 here, it should go to, when I go to 3, actually, it should be 57.6, yeah. So this actually acts as a extra 3 degrees. Even if I decided to run nothing, I'm still getting that extra 3 degrees. So it's a good way to, if someone didn't want to run any aero, you can still kind of give them a little nudge where you say, well, no, you're actually going to have to run 2 degrees. It just won't show up in your possible abilities to change. You're not, they don't have that option to change it to 0. Where if you leave it at 0, they do have the option to go no downforce, please. Just a personal option if you want to add that in. I'll get into max lifts here. You want to kind of stay in a reasonable doubt. So, you really don't want to be cranking. I really want to take this car here with very minimal aerodynamics effects. It's nowhere near a time attack car or a very fast one at that either. It's not built at all. The chassis isn't really made yet to handle all the downforce and the power. So it's more of just the stock car. So I really wouldn't run this much downforce for the rear wing. It's really not. It's more of just a kind of reducing drag, and creating a small amount of downforce. So I'd probably make this maybe 0.3 might feel good. You have to go in and test in a game to see kind of what you like and what feels relatively correct. It really helps if you have a wheel. If you're playing on wheel, if you're playing on mouse and controller, I find sometimes it is difficult to feel how the car is shifting weights and how it's kind of losing grip if your downforce settings are a little too extreme. I've seen some people crank these, and you don't want to do that either. That can be actually bad. Which you would think it would be great, and you just turn your drag down, because if you turn your drag down, you get no negative effects of air drag. But if there's too much force pushing down, that is force pushing down. So your suspension component's going around a corner. I've seen a couple cars where they've cranked this slider, and when you take a corner, the suspension will break, and it acts not optimal at all. So it's not something you really want to do. Maybe I could see it if you are developing a model that can achieve this much downforce and not start breaking out itself. If it's kind of a model that fits that sort of downforce characteristics, if you're building that big time attack car, you can go higher with your specs. But you have to remember that this is just your rear wing. You also have to take into account that your front wing is also then producing negative 0.8, and then my rear wing is 0.8, and then my under tray is 0.6, and my main body's doing 0.2. It all adds up, and it creates a lot of force keeping the car on the ground, and that can break suspension or cause the car to be unrealistically sticky. If that's what you're going for, then more power to you. But try to keep it relative to what the car actually should be making. It's a good rule of thumb. Max drag is, like I said, your air kind of resistance, your max drag from straight on. This can be moved up and down for the P1. It's kind of a small body cigar car, so this I moved down. I'm not sure exactly what I set it to, but just lower than the average car. Going off of specs that you can check from the XRT, you can look at the FC, different race cars, different open wheelers. You can check their main body numbers and kind of get an idea of where you should roughly be. Is a good way to look at it. Side drag, I recommend putting side drag up, or it's just kind of your drag from the side, from what I know. I ran into an issue on the RC car where my side drag was actually, I didn't think the car would have much side drag, so I turned it down. But there's a weird bug right now for the Live for Speed game that, like in game, where the RC, you would drive it backwards, would be faster, since there was less drag, it would be faster in reverse than forwards. So a good rule of thumb from Scowen actually said that taking your max drag into account, take your side drag and go roughly double, usually, or at least somewhere in that ballpark. You really don't want this to be 0 and then have max drag up here, have your drag up here, where someone might be able to break your car or it just won't function properly. It can get a little weird in online lobbies, so good rule of thumb: keep it above this, or try to keep it relatively correct. There's a lot more surface area here, roughly even double, if that makes sense, than there is surface area of this here, looking straight on. I know there's a lot of factors that go into calculating aerodynamic surface area when looking straight on, and wind effects and drag and how that all works, but a good rule of thumb is that, it makes sense that this side of the car for your side drag would be, if you take this surface area, kind of cut it in half, it's probably double this. So good way to look at it. And I think that's it for aerodynamics.